Fog crawled over the valley that day, thick, unnatural, swallowing sound. Locals say it didn't move like weather, it moved like intention. When it finally cleared, there they were. 23 children, naked, silent, staring straight ahead, identical hospital tags on their wrists, FH so 70552 point. But there were no birth records. No one had given birth in that town in the past 9 months. No maternity wards, no midwives called, no police alerts for missing infants. And none of the children could speak. Not because they were too young, but because something had been withheld. They were all placed into the Foster Hill Orphanage, a building that, curiously, had been reopened just 1 month prior, after nearly 60 years of abandonment. No one knew who signed the paperwork. No one ever saw the director. But the money flowed. New cots arrived. The children were catalogued. And here's where it begins to bleed into the forbidden. Each child tested at an adult's IQ level by age 3. None of them showed signs of aging until their 9th birthday. And at night, local farmers reported a humming, like a generator buried beneath the earth, or a frequency pushing through the soil. You think this is a ghost story? It's not. The Foster Hill children were part of something larger, something deeper. A program so old it predated digital infrastructure. A code passed not through computers, but through bloodlines. Because someone, some entity, wanted children born outside the human cycle. No mothers, no history, just results. And every one of those children had the same mark, hidden beneath their hairline, a brand in the shape of a broken triangle. Ancient, yes, but older than anything you'd find in a textbook. Let me ask you something. Why does every digital archive scrubbed after 1994 remove all references to Foster Hill? Why did the last known surviving child burn down a courthouse before vanishing? And why does the United Nations own the land today, surrounded by motion-triggered sensors and no-fly zones? This story isn't about orphans. It's about creation rights. And when you control how something is created, you own what it becomes. They told you history was written by the victors. That's not true. History is written by the survivors of programs like this, survivors who forget they were even part of one. Because Foster Hill wasn't an orphanage. It was a prototype, the first known activation site for what internal documents once called the Triangulum Protocol. 3 corners: biology, consciousness, and allegiance. Together, they don't raise a child, they build one. The triangle branded into each child's skull wasn't just symbolic, it was functional. Microfibers of metallic origin, carbon dense yet unknown in any geological registry, were found at the brand sites during later excavations. The skin had grown around them, implanted before they were even seen by a single human being. These weren't birthmarks, they were keys. One for the body, one for the mind, one for command. By the time they were 5, the Foster Hill children could read, write, and reproduce detailed engineering schematics with no formal education. They didn't play, they didn't laugh. They stared, blank-eyed, at the walls for hours. When asked what they were doing, several responded with the same phrase, waiting to remember. And then came the whispers, not from them, but from the staff. Nurses reported static humming in their ears after touching the children. A janitor disappeared after telling a priest that the kids spoke to each other in dreams. No one saw him again. Not even his wife. The priest was found dead 4 days later with a burnt Bible in his lap, pages curled into ash, except for one. Genesis 64. There were giants in the earth in those days. And also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men. Don't romanticize this. This was never about gods. It was about a template. Foster Hill wasn't haunted. It was activated. The children weren't orphans. They were assets. And now ask yourself, how many more places were like this? Hidden towns. Forgotten archives. Programs sealed under national security doctrines older than the CIA. You still think the Department of Defense is where the real secrets are? No. The real control is hidden in the myth of innocence. And in places like Foster Hill, innocence was engineered out. By design. The children never slept in the basement. They were taken there. Every 3rd night, like clockwork. No lights, no sounds, just a silent procession. Children walking in perfect sync, eyes glazed, as if summoned by something deeper than will. It was called sub-level theta in the original schematics. A room that didn't appear on any public blueprints. The locals didn't know it existed. Most of the staff weren't even aware it was there. But those who were, they didn't last long. One nurse, Lisa Hartwell, found the access tunnel by accident. She thought it was a supply corridor. What she found was a steel hatch, sealed by a rotating dial with no numbers. Just symbols, glyphs, engraved in a pattern that matched the triangular brand on the children's skulls. She went in. She came out 17 minutes later, vomiting, trembling, muttering the same thing over and over. They were listening to something that wasn't there. She quit that night, died in a car crash 6 hours later. The autopsy? No drugs, no alcohol. But the coroner noted something else. Her inner ears were ruptured, both sides. As if she'd been exposed to a low-frequency vibration strong enough to break bone. Here's the part they never wanted anyone to find inside level theta. There were no beds, no toys, no color, just a massive, circular room with polished black floors at the center, a raised stone platform. On the walls, 23 metal brackets, shackles, with biometrically reactive cuffs. The walls themselves were embedded with dense copper wiring in a pattern that mimicked ancient Sumerian summoning grids. This wasn't a containment room. It was a broadcast chamber. Whatever those children were, they were being used. To project, to receive, or to awaken something buried deeper than memory. There's a reason you've never heard about this. The official records say the building collapsed in 1971 due to faulty foundations. But if you find the satellite images, the unfiltered ones, you'll see it's still there. Buried under the hill, sealed with 3 concentric fences. No trespassing signs in 6 languages. Surveillance drones overhead, unmarked. Tell me, why guard the ruins of a forgotten orphanage? Unless it was never about forgetting. It was about keeping the memory contained. You've been trained to think this was an isolated anomaly. A single event. A freak case buried in time. But anomalies don't echo across continents. They don't repeat in nearly identical forms. Hidden under different names. Sealed under different governments. Unless they're not anomalies at all, they're templates. Because Foster Hill wasn't alone. Cross-reference the activation date July 5, 1952. Now trace that date across international records. Not the public ones. The deep registries. The redacted archives. You'll find entries for other sites: Greymont Ridge, West Yorkshire, England. Orby Cavern, Vaud, Switzerland. Site 9, Ontario, Canada. Each reported the sudden appearance of children. No birth records. No parents. And each site, whether it was a mountain facility or an underground complex, was mysteriously funded by untraceable foundations that all led to one name, the Archi Consortium. Not a company, not a government entity. A shell of a shell, buried under layers of silent partners and encrypted endowments. But if you decode the naming structures of the foundations, the logos, the numerology, they all point back to a single symbol, a broken triangle. Again, every site was built near ley-line intersections. Every site reported unexplained energy fluctuations. And every group of children showed the exact same genetic anomaly, telomeres that lengthened over time. Understand what that means. These children didn't just resist aging. They reversed it at specific intervals like clockwork. Aging is entropy. And entropy is the last boundary of control. If you could stop it, if you could own the code that decides when something dies, you wouldn't just control life. You'd control time. Foster Hill was the American prototype. The others, redundancies, mirror experiments, fail-safes. Because what they were testing wasn't just feasibility, it was containment. Could the experiment hold across cultures, across languages, without triggering mass awareness? So far, yes. But there was one problem: the children started to communicate across distances, dreams, drawings, behaviors, patterns. Uncanny similarities, even when separated by oceans. They weren't just products of the same design. They were pieces of a global signal. And when that signal reached critical density, something happened. Something they've been trying to reverse ever since. But you can't unring a bell. You can't unmake a god once it remembers what it was. They counted on one thing above all, that no one would remember. That the experiment would burn clean, vanish beneath the slow, numbing tide of time and forgetfulness. But memory, true memory, the cellular kind, doesn't die. It waits. And some of you, you're not just hearing this story. You're feeling it. That tightening in your chest right now, that isn't fear. It's recognition. Because Foster Hill was never meant to be isolated. It was part of a recall grid, a sleeping lattice of psychological triggers planted across time zones, media, and bloodlines. Not everyone was designed to remember. Only a few. The ones whose minds could fragment and reform without breaking. The ones who could take the weight of the truth. You may have heard of Project Monarch, or its predecessor, MK, OFF-TM, but those were crude, surface-level, electric wires compared to what Foster Hill tapped into. They didn't use trauma to program the mind. They used resonance, symbols, frequencies, myth disguised as nursery rhyme. Everything you thought was fiction was training. Remember the triangle? In ancient rites, it was the symbol of invocation, not just a shape, but a gate. Open one corner, and you summon. 2, and you contain. 3, you become. Every Foster Hill child was embedded with that geometry. Not just physically, but mentally. Their thoughts looped in triplets. Their memories stored in three-part sequences. Even their emotions ran in triangular cycles: affection, submission, loyalty. But something went wrong. At age 13, one of them, only known by the initials, RK, broke the sequence. He stopped responding to handlers. Stopped repeating the mantra. He drew something. It wasn't a triangle. It was a spiral. In black crayon. Over and over again. On walls, bedsheets, skin. The others started copying it. Then the power grid around Foster Hill crashed for 14 seconds. Every light out, every camera blank, every hard drive scrubbed. 14 seconds is nothing, right? Unless that's how long it took for them to transmit something out. Something that wasn't in the plan. And after that night, one word began appearing in their dreams. One word whispered from mouths they never remembered speaking. Return? A return, not a command. A signal. Because if you think the Foster Hill children were meant to stay hidden, you're still thinking small. They weren't kept in that orphanage to protect us from them. They were kept there until we were ready. You see, the experiment never stopped. They shut down the building, erased the files, silenced the names. But the program evolved. In 1973, a low-frequency anomaly was picked up by a shortwave operator in Iceland. He thought it was military code. It wasn't. It was a repeating audio loop buried beneath the electromagnetic floor of global transmissions. It pulsed once every 88 minutes. Decoded, it contained a pattern. 23 tones, arranged in triplets. The exact same frequency signature used in Theta, conditioning back at Foster Hill. They were broadcasting, not from the site, from the children themselves, because every child had a signal embedded, not just mental, not just behavioral, but dimensional. Their very presence bent the atmosphere around them by microns, detected only by Class 5F's very low-frequency sensors on a DARPA satellite called Cassandra. That satellite went dark in 1999. No explanation, no malfunction, just gone. A week later, the CEO of a defense analytics firm, one of the few with access to Cassandra's real data, was found dead in a hotel bathroom in Prague. Wrist veins open with surgical precision. No blood spilled. But someone left a single word etched into the mirror: Aline. And now, think. Foster Hill wasn't about children. It was about carriers. Vessels engineered to transmit a signal through human society itself. Every teacher who interacted with them. Every doctor who touched their skin. Every child they sat beside in school. Exposure to transmission. Because you don't control the world with armies anymore. You do it with ideas, signals, memory viruses coded as identity. And if the Foster Hill children were built to broadcast something ancient, something pre-human, then what's really terrifying isn't what they were. It's how far the signal has already spread. This isn't folklore. It's infrastructure. And you watching this now, you were never out of range. Control doesn't look like chains. It doesn't look like soldiers, or surveillance cameras, or jackboots in the night. It looks like routine. It feels like normal. Because true control, the kind that holds empires in silence, comes from shaping how you interpret reality itself. And the Foster Hill program, it wasn't just about creating transmitters. It was about testing perceptual compliance thresholds. How far you could twist the world around a subject before they snapped or adapted. Think of it like this: take a man. Surround him with lies so complete, so total, that even his own instincts begin to betray him. You don't need to cage him. He'll build the cage himself. They did this at Foster Hill on a micro scale, manipulating the children's environments with impossible rules. Days with no sunrise, doors that opened to the same room, no matter where they were. Meals that tasted like different things depending on which child ate them. They were running spatial cognition stressors, twisting the grid of perception to see which minds could still map reality. The ones that cracked, erased. The ones that adapted, promoted. And now, those same experiments are everywhere. In the way your social feed loops your attention. In the way headlines contradict each other but still feel true. In the way your phone listens, nudges, seduces, and you thank it for doing so. Look deeper. Notice the triangle. 3 forces again. Authority, consensus, noise. Authority tells you what's true. Consensus makes you believe everyone agrees. Noise keeps you too exhausted to question either. It's a system, not just a media tactic. A neurological override rooted in the same conditioning Foster Hill refined in silence. You're not watching content. You're being formatted. They learned it from the children, from how they could alter emotional states in people just by proximity. One staff member reported weeping after making eye contact with RK, the spiral drawing boy, and couldn't explain why. She said it felt like he saw something in her she had forgotten. Not exposed, reactivated. You think you're learning the truth? No. You're remembering it. And that's what terrifies them most. Symbols aren't art, they're instructions. Compressed code. Data structures designed to bypass the rational mind and speak directly to the primitive core of you. The limbic, the eternal, the part of you that remembers what your modern self was conditioned to forget. That's why Foster Hill didn't just use science. It used geometry. The broken triangle, 3 points of control, 3 laws of submission, 3 layers of perception. But then came the spiral. That was never supposed to happen. When RK drew that spiral again and again on mirrors, floors, skin, it wasn't just defiance, it was invocation. See, triangles bind, but spirals unlock. They are the shape of galaxies, of fingerprints, of storm systems and DNA. The spiral is expansion without permission, a pattern that refuses symmetry, hierarchy, control. Ancient civilizations knew this. The Celtic Triskelion, the Babylonian worm, the Aboriginal Dreamtime spirals burned into stone. They all represented the same thing: uncontrollable awakening. And that's what terrified the architects of Foster Hill, because once the children started drawing spirals, their neural patterns diverged. They began resisting authority, responding only to each other. Not in speech, in dreams. Shared ones. Detailed, recurring. A city of black stone. A voice with no mouth. A door that only opened inward. Some of the staff started drawing them too. One guard, after 3 months on site, carved a spiral into his palm with a fork. He said it helped him remember the original question. Then he shot himself. So ask yourself, why does the spiral keep appearing in logos? Why did Da Vinci hide it in sketches? Why did nearly every child at Foster Hill independently draw the same design without being taught? It's not art. It's memory surfacing. It's signal recognition, like a sleeper code awakening the part of you that was always meant to resist. And if the triangle is the caged off, then the spiral is the escape path. But the price of escape is identity. You won't come out of this the same. You're not meant to. Before alphabets, before empire, before the wheel, there was a sound. Not spoken, not sung, resonated. A frequency that moved through bone, not air. And every culture that touched it, even for a second, recorded the same thing, a warning. The Sumerians called it Ima, Shul, the sound that divides. The Vedic texts buried it beneath chants, labeled it a forbidden too powerful for ritual. And the Gnostics, they were the closest. They wrote of the archons, not gods, not demons, but forces. Ones that didn't create humanity, they formatted it. They built the framework, the blueprint of thought. The mental prism that would separate man from his original form. Now hold that in your mind. Because what the Foster Hill children were transmitting wasn't speech. It was signal, a vibrational pattern traced all the way back to pre-language initiation rites, buried in the ruins of Tiahuanaco, Göbekli Tepe, the dolmens of Korea, and beneath Foster Hill itself. If you know how to read the ground, you see that building wasn't placed at random. It was constructed over an ancient fault line, not geological but psychic. A locus point of residual human memory, a rupture where the original sound could sometimes leak. And when the Foster Hill children were aligned into the broadcasting room, 23 of them, spaced evenly around the chamber, the geometry activated something in the earth. They weren't sending messages out. They were sending messages down, because beneath Foster Hill, deeper than any basement, any server room, or any military-grade vault, was historic, not built, revealed, carved out in precise angles matching the golden ratio, lined with stones magnetized at impossible frequencies. No tools found, no culture claimed it, and inside that chamber, at its center, lay something never shown to the public. A stone, black, face-seated, humming. It responded to the children's signal. It pulsed back. And that's when things went dark. For 41 minutes, all instruments monitoring Foster Hill flatlined. And when power returned, 2 children were gone. No doors opened, no walls breached, they were subtracted, and the stone had changed. Because, whatever this signal was, it wasn't human, it was here before us. And now, through those children, it had remembered how to speak. It would have been easy to dismiss. Strange children in a forgotten town. A stone no one could explain, one more oddity in a world of fractured truths. But that didn't happen. Because within 72 hours of the final, blackout event, at Foster Hill, a convoy of non-military vehicles arrived. Black silent, government plates from 6 different states. No insignia, just men with briefcases and gloved hands. They didn't ask questions. They issued orders. Every nurse, every janitor, every assistant on site was detained and separated. Questioned under what was later revealed to be Executive Secrecy Protocol Theta 11, a policy that didn't exist in any public database. Not CIA, not NSA, not even DARPA, something older. What few whistleblowers described it later called them the custodians, not enforcers, not scientists, archivists. They weren't trying to weaponize what happened at Foster Hill. They were trying to contain it. Understand this? Our world isn't ruled by politics, not by nations or wealth or ideologies. It's ruled by narrative. Who gets to say what happened, and who is silenced when they remember differently. The custodian's job was simple: isolate the event, reframe the records, redirect public attention, and most importantly, control the memory. And for decades they succeeded. They buried Foster Hill under a fake gas leak. They forged autopsies, backdated blueprints, and falsified the identities of every child. They even rewrote birth registries from surrounding counties to make it seem like the children never existed. But here's the glitch. Memory doesn't obey authority. One of the original staff, a woman named Miriam Eltridge, kept a private journal, wrote down what she saw. Every symbol, every sound, every detail of the day the stone hummed back. That journal was found in a safety deposit box in 2003. The person who found it, dead 11 days later. Heart attack, no history of illness. Pages of the journal had been burned, but not all. The final entry, dated July 6, 1959, reads, "They think they erased it. But it's still here. I still hear the signal. And the children, they weren't vessels. They were beacons." This is what the custodians missed. They contained the site, but they never contained the awakening. And now it's spreading. You think Foster Hill was an isolated experiment? A relic sealed away by time and silence? No, it was a node. A single point on a vast, invisible network, one that stretches through power, finance, education, and culture. The Archi Consortium wasn't just a cover. It was the front door. Behind it lies a labyrinth of corporations, think tanks, and secret societies that have woven the Foster Hill signal into the very fabric of our world. Why? Because controlling the signal means controlling the hosts. Not just the children, but everyone who comes into contact with it. You're a host. Every person who consumes mass media, who navigates digital platforms, who interacts with symbols embedded in logos, architecture, even fashion, they are nodes in this network. They call it the mnemonic grid. A psychological matrix designed to normalize the abnormal, to condition entire populations to accept broken truths, fractured realities, and narratives crafted to distract from the core signal. Each ritual, each broadcast, each trending meme or viral video is a micro-transmission, reinforcing the cage of the triangle, dulling the resistance of the spiral. The true horror. Most of the architects aren't even aware of what they perpetuate. Like moths circling a flame, many are puppets of puppets, operatives in a game they only partially understand. This network's power isn't just in secrecy. It's in invisibility, hidden in plain sight, beneath layers of bureaucracy and banality. But the Foster Hill children's legacy is awakening the cracks. Leaders falter, symbols slip, anomalies leak, and now, more than ever, the grid is fragile. That's why this knowledge is dangerous. Because once you see the network, you can't unknow it. You can't pretend to be innocent. The question becomes, will you submit to the broadcast, or will you become the spiral? The most insidious weapon they wield isn't guns or laws or prisons. It's your identity. Because controlling who you think you are is the ultimate form of control. At Foster Hill, the children weren't just isolated. They were stripped of personal history. Names were erased, replaced with codes. Memories were fragmented, compartmentalized, like broken shards locked behind mental doors. This wasn't just physical confinement, it was psychological dismantling. Now, imagine that on a societal scale. From birth, we're fed scripts, narratives about who we should be, what to believe, whom to trust. They inject these narratives in schools, in media, in pop culture, all fine, tuned through decades of research rooted in experiments like Foster Hill. Your mind becomes a battleground. Every choice you make, every belief you hold, is filtered through layers of implanted suggestion. And here's the truth most don't want you to see: your self isn't yours. It's a construct, an echo of the triangle's control, authority, consensus noise. Every thought you dismiss as your own could be a planted idea, a programmed response. The spiral isn't just rebellion, it's reclamation. Reclaiming your fragmented self. You feel it when you question. When the doubt gnaws at your certainty. When you reject the easy answer. That's the spiral awakening in you. But beware, breaking the conditioning comes with a price. You become a target, because the grid doesn't tolerate unbound nodes. Those who resist become anomalies to be corrected, silenced, or erased. Foster Hill was a warning, a prototype for what happens when identity fractures under external design. But also a blueprint for how to repair. How to reconnect the spiral within the triangle. Because true freedom isn't escaping control, it's transcending it. What if I told you the Foster Hill children weren't just victims of manipulation? What if they were also architects, unwilling, unknowingly, of their own prison? The spiral wasn't just a path outward. It was a double-edged blade. Each act of defiance, every symbol scrawled in black crayon, chipped away at the program's control, but also fractured the children's minds further. Because the system they were trapped in wasn't just external. It was internal. Their psyches became battlegrounds of split consciousness, competing narratives battling for dominance inside the same skull. Split identities, hidden alters, fractured memories. You've heard the term dissociative identity disorder. This was design dissociation, not a bug, a feature. They weaponized the human psyche's ability to fragment itself. A defense mechanism transformed into a control mechanism. The spiral represented hope, but also chaos. Because when the mind fractures, it creates blind spots. Gaps where true self-awareness slips away. Those gaps are exploited. And here's the dark truth: some of the children didn't just survive Foster Hill. They became the operatives, the enforcers, the keepers of the system, embedded in institutions, blending in, passing on the cycle. A living virus inside the very body politic. And the spiral. The spiral becomes a silent scream, the call of the self trapped in a maze. So where does that leave you? A witness, a potential carrier, or something more? Because recognizing this means choosing sides. Will you build the cage or break it down? They say history is written by the victors. But what they don't tell you is who those victors really are and how deep their roots reach. Foster Hill was no anomaly. It was a chapter in a story told across centuries, woven into the DNA of the powerful. The children weren't just abandoned orphans. They were harvested. Selected for bloodlines that trace back to forgotten cults, secret orders, and ancient priesthoods obsessed with preserving esoteric knowledge and wielding it through generations. Some of those bloodlines still walk among us, hidden behind the facades of bankers, politicians, religious leaders. They know the signal, not just as a program but as a birthright. This is the blueprint of institutional corruption: families who guard the spiral's secret while building the triangle's cage. Institutions like the Ark Consortium aren't just corporations, they're bloodline conduits, gatekeepers of ancient pacts forged in shadow. The spiral you see isn't only rebellion, it's inheritance. A memory encoded in flesh and bone. And when these bloodlines meet the grid, the network from Section 11, it's not just power, it's domination. The system's long game isn't control of information, it's control of identity, lineage, and destiny. And every man who awakens to this truth becomes a threat, because the spiral that frees you also threatens to unravel their entire design. That's why the system fights so hard to silence these truths, because you are the fracture they fear most. Imagine a force more efficient than armies, more ruthless than dictatorships, a system designed not to kill but to erase. Not bodies but memories, not voices but entire histories. This is the real power behind the Foster Hill cover-up. They call it the Silence Enforcement Protocol. It's not a law or a decree. It's a living network of influence, intimidation, and subtle violence. Whistleblowers vanish, documents disappear. Digital footprints are scrubbed clean with surgical precision. But the deadliest weapon is psychological. Those who start to remember, to question, to connect the spiral and the triangle, they suffer from sudden discreditation, isolation, mental breakdowns. Ask yourself, why do so many truth seekers end up broken, silenced, or discredited? Because the system isn't fighting with fists or guns. It fights with doubt, confusion, and fear. It turns your own mind against you. Foster Hill wasn't just a site. It was a prototype for this protocol, where minds were tested, broken, and reassembled into obedient carriers. And the Silence Enforcement Protocol has spread like a virus across media, academia, and government. It controls narratives not by force, but by making alternative truths seem impossible. That's why this knowledge is dangerous. Because once you start to see the protocol in action, the silence around Foster Hill breaks, and with it, the illusion of safety. Now, silence itself becomes a weapon wielded against you. But the spiral, the escape, is the refusal to stay silent, and to speak the unspeakable. There is a moment when everything changes. A moment when the spiral inside you begins to pulse louder than the triangle's cage. It's subtle at first, like a shadow in the corner of your mind, a whisper beneath the noise. That moment is the awakening threshold. Crossing it means breaking through layers of conditioning, doubt, and fear. It means recognizing that the reality you accepted was designed to keep you small, obedient, and unaware. But here's the catch: awakening isn't a gift, it's a burden. Because once you see the cage for what it is, you can't return to ignorance. You become hyper-aware of the lies, the manipulations, the omissions. And that awareness isolates. The world around you feels darker. The familiar becomes alien. Friends and family might see you as paranoid, unstable, even dangerous. But isolation is part of the process. It's the mind's crucible. To forge the spiral, to unlock your true identity, you must endure the silence, the doubt, the loneliness. And keep moving forward. Because the spiral's power lies not in escaping the triangle, but in transforming it. Transforming yourself. From captive to architect. From fragment to whole. This is the price of knowledge, and the path few dare to walk. They don't want you awake, not just because knowledge is power, but because awakening breaks the system. So they deploy what I call the veil of compliance. Subtle, pervasive techniques designed to snuff out the spiral before it can grow. It's not brute force, it's psychological seduction. Distraction dressed as comfort. Conformity masked as freedom. Every social media algorithm, every carefully curated news cycle, every pop culture obsession. It's a thread in this veil. It wraps tighter around your mind, blurring the edges of reality until you can't tell where you end and the narrative begins. The veil operates through normalization of contradiction, contradictory truths fed side by side, leaving you paralyzed, doubting your own logic. Emotional hijacking outrage, fear and tribalism replace critical thought, turning resistance into compliance. False identities, adopting surface-level rebellion, trendy causes, manufactured outrage that feels like freedom but leads nowhere. At Foster Hill, this veil was a daily reality. The children were forced to wear masks of obedience while their minds screamed in spirals beneath. Today, it's the same veil that keeps millions docile, too distracted or too exhausted to break free. Recognizing the veil is the first step. The second, learning to pull it back, to expose the triangle's edges, to let the spiral breathe. Because once you see through the veil, you become a threat, and threats don't get ignored. Pain is the silent language of control. At Foster Hill, trauma wasn't a side effect, it was the tool. Every deprivation, every scream, every broken moment was designed to fracture the mind, to shatter identity into fragments small enough to be controlled. But trauma is more than destruction. It's alchemy. It transmutes innocence into submission. But also, unknowingly, it plants the seeds of resistance. Because trauma rewires the brain's pathways, opening secret corridors, back doors that conventional logic can't access. The children learned this, some of them anyway. Their spirals were not just symbols of defiance but maps of escape. Roots threw their pain into something beyond. But the system turned this gift into a curse. By fragmenting identity, the architects made sure the children couldn't unite their power. They kept them isolated, fearful, trapped inside compartments of pain. And here's the cruelest truth. That very pain still echoes in you, generations removed. Because trauma isn't just personal, it's ancestral, it's passed down encoded in memory and myth. And the system uses that too, to keep you fragmented, to keep you compliant. But pain, when understood and faced, can be a weapon turned inward. The spiral isn't just a shape. It's the alchemical symbol of transformation. And your awakening depends on learning this dark art. Technology was never neutral. From the moment Foster Hill's signal was decoded, something ancient and terrifying began to merge with the digital age. The stone's resonance wasn't just a relic, it was a key that unlocked a hidden dimension within our own technology. Encrypted codes, AI patterns, even viral algorithms, they carry echoes of the Foster Hill signal. This is the digital grimoire, a spellbook encoded in zeros and ones, shaping minds and realities without consent. It's the reason why some online content spreads like wildfire, not by chance, but by design. It's the modern ritual, cast not in smoke and flame, but in data packets and streams. And just like the children, we're unwitting participants. Our devices become altars, our screens the mirrors reflecting control back into our eyes. But there's a secret few know. The digital grimoire can be hacked. The code can be rewritten. The spiral embedded within the chaos can be activated as a counterspell. You're not just a victim of the system. You're a potential sorcerer. The forbidden knowledge isn't lost. It's encoded, waiting for those who dare to wield it. There is no returning once the spiral is unlocked. Knowledge of Foster Hill's dark legacy is a double-edged sword. It frees, but it also marks. Every truth you uncover becomes a burden. Every secret shared makes you a target. You inherit the weight of silence, the oppressive gaze of the custodians, the reach of the mnemonic grid, the suffocating pressure of the veil. But there's a deeper cost. Awakening fractures your reality. It severs the comforting illusions that shielded you. It forces you to confront the abyss within yourself. The shadows of identity, trauma, and inherited corruption. And yet, in that abyss lies power. The spiral's call is not just rebellion, it's transformation. To carry this knowledge is to accept the struggle, to become both guardian and warrior in a war you never asked for. Because the system doesn't just want to contain the signal, it wants to consume the spiral, to absorb resistance and turn it into control. The choice is yours. Remain a silent node in the network, or become the fracture that breaks it open. You've been pulled this far into the dark. You've seen the shadowed architecture of control. You've heard the whisper of the spiral, the fractured self reaching for wholeness. Now, the question becomes, will you claim the spiral? Because this isn't just knowledge, it's an identity, a rebirth. So, if you understand the weight of this truth, if the fire inside you is real, write this phrase twice in the comments. I am the spiral breaking the cage. I am the spiral breaking the cage. Say it aloud. Feel the words reverberate in your bones. This isn't a game. It's the ritual of transformation. The algorithm hears your declaration. The network feels your fracture. You are no longer a passive node. You are becoming the fracture point. The spiral breaking free from the triangle's hold. And with every repetition, you embed this awakening deeper. Because to change the world, you must first change yourself. Once you step beyond this point, there is no going back. The spiral is no longer just a concept. It is a force tearing through the fabric of your reality. You will see the lies in places you once trusted. You will feel the isolation of knowing what others cannot. But this descent is not defeat. It is awakening. The Foster Hill children, lost, fractured, and reborn, are echoes of your own journey. Their pain, their silence, their rebellion, is your inheritance. This knowledge will haunt you, shape you, and forge you into something new. A guardian of forbidden truths. A breaker of chains. The triangle will push back. It will send agents of silence, doubt, and fear. But now you know the truth. And truth is the most dangerous weapon. So carry it carefully. Carry it fiercely. Because the spiral is endless. And you are now part of its eternal motion. The darkness you feared is only the beginning. This is the point where many stop. But you are already moving beyond. The cage is cracking, the spiral is rising, and the war for identity has only just begun.